Welcome to Unmute Yourself. I'm your host, Jennifer Carter, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is about lifting the curtain on leadership, purpose, and the real stories behind people who dared to do things differently. We'll talk about how they found their path, the struggles they faced, and how they built something that truly matters. These are everyday people doing extraordinary things, and I want you to know you are capable of that too. So, for today's conversation, I'm thrilled to welcome Megan Elkins. Megan is a brilliant social impact leader whose work has shaped communities and systems across education, housing, workforce development, and beyond. Megan currently serves as a program officer for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in New Mexico, where she works to create opportunities for thriving children, working families, and equitable communities. Her background spans everything from community organizing and affordable housing to reentry employment and systems design. And through it all, she's remained committed to helping organizations dream bigger, collaborate deeper, and build lasting impact. What I love about Meg's story is that it didn't happen overnight. She's someone who spent years doing meaningful work that still didn't quite fit until she found the role that truly brought all her experience and passion together. Megan, I am so excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here.
So we've known each other for quite a long time now. And I
Yes.
know, yes, and I know you've worked across so many areas, right? Education, housing, workforce development, reentry. And so what's that common thread that's always pulled you forward?
When I went to college, nobody told me about social work. And I started doing communications as a study. And I got placed at a nonprofit program on campus. And it just kind of opened this world of you can do things for others and get paid for it. And that's where it started. So I was a work study student. I worked for a rape crisis center, which was heavy and deep work. And it kind of made me realize for the first time what compassion fatigue was. And I think it was probably before that word was even brought into the light. But for me, doing community work is it's that feel good chemical. It's that feeling of having impact and having the work that you do matter. I think what took me a really long time to figure out is that you can do great things in community. And the paradox is it can still be bad for you. And so trying to find the right fit where it's not going to drain your soul while you pour your soul into others.
Oh my gosh, you hit the nail on the head. I know there's a lot of folks out there, right, who are maybe in the social services or even doing something that they love in a completely unrelated to field to nonprofit work or social service work, and they're still drained. And they're like, why am I so tired? And I know through your career journey, and I think you just said this, right? You were doing important work for years, but something still wasn't quite right. So, how did you figure out what was missing? And how did you finally know that where you are right now in philanthropy was the right fit for you?
When I started working, I didn't have children. And so I could give of myself all day and into the evening. And I could give of myself in many ways. When I was working in affordable housing, I was working with moms who wanted to get healthy. And so I went and got certified as a personal trainer so that I could teach wellness classes. And when I would identify a need, when we wanted to do enrichment for kids, we started a running club. And that still is continuing to today. What I tried to do early in my career was be all things to all people. And what I realized over time is that in being all things to all people, I was being nothing to myself.
Wow.
And it took a really long time to get there. So I would do great work with a great organization, and then I would burn out, crash out hard. And I'd think, if I just go somewhere else and work on a different, they call them insidious problems of society, right? Poverty, hunger, abuse. If I could just go work in a different place, do something new, then I can get by. But I would get to the same point no matter where I was at.
So, how did you what was it that finally clicked in saying, oh my gosh, I have to pour into myself first or know what I want? Or what stopped that cycle for you?
When I was working with the Austin Independent School District, I was teaching social emotional learning to parents and children. And that's where I kind of started to cue in on how your body tells you what's not working.
Mhm.
And over time, I learned the vocabulary for setting boundaries. I learned the vocabulary for naming how I feel. And it started kind of an internal dialogue of, is the work that I'm doing in alignment with what I want to be as a mother? As my children got older and I wanted to spend more time with them, I realized that I couldn't pour myself out into community and come home empty and still be a good mom. And so I started to look for roles where I could step back a little bit, still be
Mhm.
having high impact on community, but not be on the front lines. But what I realized that, people talk about self-care like it's an optional thing. It's not. And people also say, I don't have time for self-care. And that's a lie because we take time to eat and we take time to sleep and we take time to bathe ourselves. And that's all self-care. If you're not prioritizing the wellness in other aspects of your life, whether it's getting a counselor or exercising or eating better, then you're just draining yourself intentionally. I mean, and it takes a long time to come to grapple with that and come to terms with, I am not doing what's best for me, even though I know what is best for me.
So, with that being said, when you were in those seasons or positions where you're burning a candle at both ends, you're trying to work your way, like if I can only work harder, it's going to get better. What kept you going in that time until you found alignment? Because I'm seeing people just give up and saying, this is all that there is. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to suck it up until I basically have a breakdown,
Yeah. Well, the option to not work is not there, right? When you're
right?
supporting a family. And so I knew I needed to keep working. Changing jobs doesn't always solve the problem. What I had to dig deep on, and actually a coach helped me do this, were what are the things that I really enjoy doing? What are my key assets? And then what are things that I could do that I haven't even thought about? Because you don't know what you don't know. And so working with someone really helped me realize there are jobs that are social impact that aren't a program coordinator or direct case management or the things that were really hard for me to keep going on. And the other thing that I would say is I know that there are ways in which I can serve my community that aren't my paycheck. And when I freed myself up to say, I can still do good and I can do it as a volunteer, I can still do good. And my work may not be directly impacting families on the daily. That really opened up some opportunities. Coming home to New Mexico was a really big deal. And so the role I'm in now, I'm able to identify great leaders in community who are working really hard and doing good work and give them money and get out the way. And that has been really fulfilling. But I also work in a team of women who have kids where we center our families first. We have excellent work-life balance. And, coming into this, those were things that I knew about myself. So looking for alignment in, I want to be home when my kids get home from school. I want to be able to go volunteer at the PTA when I'm needed. I don't want to take calls on the weekend, and setting those standards and then making them non-negotiable. I also want to show up as my full self. And I will say that when you're really, really tired every day, one of the questions you should ask yourself is how much of that is because you're expending energy being someone you're not? I think that that is something that a lot of women in particular, we do, especially when we get into middle management. We try to fit a mold that we think we're supposed to be in so that we can, get that promotion, chase that next title. And it's exhausting. And when you
Mhm.
can let go of that and be your authentic self, not only do you have more energy, but people see that and they recognize that and they will gravitate towards awesome authenticity.
Absolutely. So tell us about some of the behaviors that you noticed in yourself that weren't quite authentic in the moment that you caught them. And now how you are showing up differently in contrast to that.
Hmm. So it depends on the situation. There
Right?
were scenarios where I was sitting in meetings and saying nothing. Maybe it was a room full of men and they all had great ideas that they wanted to tell everybody out, but they didn't have airspace for others. And I would just sit back and I would go to the meeting and then come back and do the work the next day. Inversely, there might be rooms where I was speaking too much. And I had to really realize there's somebody else in this room who hasn't spoken and I need to listen. And so it depends on the situation.
Mhm.
But I think that, the other thing is that not trying to know all the answers. So sometimes we think, oh, we've got to have all the answers. We've got to be the expert on everything. And that's not true. Like the best thing you can say is, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out because that helps everybody else in that room who's feeling uncertain take a deep breath and be like, oh, it's not just me. I'm not the only person who doesn't know what we should do in this moment.
Yeah, because that's impossible to know what to do in every single moment. And something I admire about you, Meg, is you always find the answer and you don't just find a answer, you find multiple answers,
I
right?
do love data.
You do love data. Best practices in research. You're great at it. So I really like how that now you get to use that skill as a program officer in a philanthropic organization. So just what are you seeing right now in the philanthropic landscape, especially for organizations working towards equity and systems change?
Yeah. So, the fatigue with the existential crisis of the week, I'm seeing leadership start to cave. And I think that we're in a place where organizations were already kind of fragile are literally on the cusp of falling down. And so on the plus side, I'm seeing this emergence of co-directors. And I love that because leadership is such a lonely place. And for one woman to run an organization and have no confidant other than her board, which is not a confidant, to
Mhm.
support her, that's not healthy. So I'm seeing, people stepping away from leadership, going in a completely different route or bringing up an AD or somebody else that's next to them and bringing them up as a co-director so that they're not standing alone. The other thing that I'm seeing is organizations are starting to have to evaluate what are their primary lines of service, what do they need to give up, what do they need to merge, and what do they need to reevaluate. And the ones that are not doing that are the most panicked. The ones who are ready to ride this storm are the ones who are already having those conversations of what's mission critical, what's in our wheelhouse, and who are the members of the community, other organizations that we should be bringing into our space to serve our clients' needs.
That sounds so familiar to what you just spoke about with yourself, right? Like not being able to be all things to all people and really having to live into who you are, show up authentically, what's draining your energy, and then seeing nonprofits and organizations when they're in a funding crisis, leadership crisis, the stress, what did you say? The existential crisis of the week? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Trying to spread themselves so thin and still trying to do it all. Got it. Oh, so good, Egg. So, as a funder, because you were on the grantee side for such a long time, so you've gotten to see this landscape from both sides now. So, what do you say does a true partnership look like between a funder and a grantee? And what are signs that that collaboration is working really, really well?
So I would say, the founder of the organization I work for now was famous for saying, those most proximate to the challenge are most proximate to the solution. Essentially, can you let community tell you what they need to solve the problem? And a good program officer does just that. If you are a funder, rather than putting out an opportunity for funding for a niche program or a specific thing that ties to your mission, saying, what do you need community? And then meeting them where they're at. I always laugh. I tell my supervisor, I never had a program officer prior to this job that I wanted to hug. And when we
Oh,
go places, everybody on the team gets a hug. Everybody loves the people that we work with. They love their program officers. They're able to be vulnerable to us. They're able to say, I've made a mistake or we need more time. And we are gracious with that. And that's how I knew I found mission alignment
mm,
because at the end of the day, I don't want to just be someone who's handing out money and holding up expectations. I want to be somebody who they can say, we're in a bad spot and we really need help or we really need time and be able to respond appropriately with that. And that's been all the difference in this moment of really catastrophic timing for our grantees.
that's wonderful. So, okay, so it sounds like you've really gotten to demonstrate impact and have opportunities to influence solutions, right? So that need is being met while also being collaborative and creative. And I know not all nonprofits have that experience with funders, right? Just depending on, I mean, the nature of the philanthropic organization or the governmental organization that is funding them. So, what advice would you give to leaders who want to build those strong funding relationships, but they are getting pressure to fit their programs within a specific mold?
Mm. In this moment of scarcity, it's I hesitate to give advice on how someone should
Hmm.
pitch themselves to funding because that changes and it depends on your ecosystem, right? I would say, you know, mission, vision, and values should not be fungible. If you believe in a certain thing, if you believe in serving a certain population, your board needs to back that. And you need to be able to, and then this has happened with many folks that I've worked with, say no to funders who are telling you can't serve that population anymore. Of
Yeah.
course, the trade-off is, you may lose staff, you may lose funding, you may have to cut a program. But this time is it is temporal. It is not going to be forever. We're going to get back to a place where we can get back at the work that we need. The work that we've been doing, and the need may be greater, but we are going to be in a position to go back to operating. What I think is really important is have someone on your team who is always
Mhm.
looking long distance. It's really easy to get sucked into the moment and this moment of scarcity and, making payroll next month. But someone, whether it's a board member or an advisor, has to keep their eye on the horizon. Where are we going to be next year? Where are we going to be 2 years from now? And then look at radical interdependency, because that's one thing I think that many organizations, when they're in this moment, they think they're sitting there alone. But actually, for example, in Central Texas, there are 6,000 nonprofits. There are 6,000 nonprofits in the whole state of New Mexico. And they are looking for somebody to have that moment with. And it may be that you're merging. It may be that you're, braiding services to meet the continuum of care for your clients. But you can have those conversations with other organizations and start to plug holes in a way that doesn't hit your bottom line.
Yeah, it's using I really like that. It's not looking at each other as competition, it's looking at each other as an amplification of what you're doing.
Yes.
So, you've seen organizations at every stage of growth, right? You've got maybe a small, even volunteer startup executive director for a nonprofit, all the way to organizations that are hundreds of millions of dollars nonprofit. And you've seen nonprofits, I'm sure, in programs that have massive impact and depth, right? And grow and change and evolve, and others that focus more on volume. I suppose I'm most curious in what differentiates the nonprofits that successfully scale their impact from those that plateau.
Yeah. Number one, they didn't skip on evaluation.
What
If
do you
you
mean
can
by evaluation, Meg?
if you cannot demonstrate your impact on your clients, you cannot secure additional fundings, you cannot scale. You can have all the feel good anecdotal narrative that you can muster. But if you can't demonstrate that you help them gain economic impact or impacted recidivism or housing or whatever your cause is, you are going to struggle to get additional funding, both from philanthropic, but also from public sector. Public sector is really going to want to see that you have demonstrated that impact. And it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to, go hire a university or Institute of Higher Learning to do that evaluation for you. And there are many organizations that offer free or low cost support for evaluation. The second thing is they have a strong back of house. Do not jeopardize your federal funding or your 501(c)(3) status because you don't have good accounting. You have to have good record keeping. That is paramount to being able to maintain and then also to scale. Then if that means you're outsourcing that, I have many organizations that I work with that will do a you do, we do, I do. So you, consultant, accountant, will manage this process for us. Then you will train someone in-house to do it alongside you. And eventually when they have mastered that, we will do it ourselves. I think that's a really strong model. For some organizations, it might be, finding another nonprofit who is really good at that, or a fiscal sponsor who can take that on for them, especially if you're handling state and federal dollars. I think that is where people are going to be at the highest risk if they are not able to pass an audit.
Holy cow. Passing the audit, back of house. Yeah, whenever I work with an organization, I do see that's mainly where folks struggle, right?
Yes, because
Especially
it's found so good.
Go ahead. No, go, Meg.
No, because organizations are built of people with big hearts that are stuck in the mission. They didn't go to school for accounting, right? And so if you can't find somebody who can do the numbers to back you up, heart only takes you so far.
Right. And donors, I find oftentimes they don't want to fund the accounting and the HR, right? It's like, I want to
Yes.
give because to help so and so with housing or food or young people in education. And so I think from my perspective, leading a nonprofit for quite a while, um, making sure that funders are understanding that the back of house is so important. So Meg, I'm so glad that you said that today. Something else that came to mind to ask you about was how you approach learning and iteration. Because when I think of you, you're the queen of research, learning, best practices, innovation, trying something new. Let's test this. Let's measure this. Let's analyze this. So how do you approach learning and iteration? I would say both personally and organizationally to make sure programs evolve rather than stagnate.
Oh, yes. So on the DISC assessment, I am super high I. My team, I drive them nuts. I'm like, here's this podcast about workforce development.
Yeah.
Here's this podcast about health equity. Read this recent report. And so I spend a lot of time pulling information in the moment that it's relevant. And then I tuck it away for that moment when I need it. When it comes to iteration, you can't change too much at one time, right? It's just like self improvement. So for me, if I'm doing like a self care goal, I don't say, I'm going to drink more water and I'm going to go to bed by 9 o'clock and I'm going to exercise an hour every day all at the same time. That doesn't work. Right. And then if you start to slack off, you can't pinpoint what was not working. Pick one
Yeah.
thing. So with program iteration, one of the things that I think that's, can be very, very beneficial if you're just getting started, if you do direct service, do a stop out survey.
What does that mean, Meg?
So if you are serving clients and you need to get them through an enrollment process and a case management process, and then they need to complete a program, people stop out all along that journey. Why? Ask every time someone stops out as like a 3-question survey. You can set up a text system even to ask, why are you dropping out? Because that's where you find out the enrollment people are not telling them all the documents that they need when they need to come to the first session. And so they're stopping out there, or they didn't have enough touch points during the class time when things got hard. And without that support, they left. So that is something that I always talk about with my grantees is like, where are people leaving? And the other thing is assessing the continuum of care. So many organizations, because they're leading with their hearts, want to do all the things for the client to get them all the way to stabilization or homeostasis, whatever you're trying to get them to, right? But when you look at the continuum of care, there are only certain points that you own. And so you need to then go through and identify who in the community can plug in, who can touch that client in that moment to get them to that final point.
Yeah, that goes back to your partnership, right?
Yes.
In
Yes.
collaboration point. Wonderful. So going back to you, what's one lesson that you've learned from another leader or organization that's changed the way you approach your own work?
Hmm. Something that I learned from you, Jen, is that when you are with someone, you give them 100% of your undivided attention. And you feel like in that moment, when you're on the other side of the table of you, Jennifer, you're the only person in the world. And it was something that was so validating, and it felt like an honor to have your time. And I have tried to carry that through when I'm in conversation with a grantee or I'm in community, giving 100%, not being on my phone, not showing up late and leaving early. That is something that really ingrains trust, and it really helps people feel seen. And so I think that's one of the greatest lessons of leadership that you gave me was, giving 100% of your attention to someone when you're with them.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And you and your presence and your intellect and you care so deeply. People get that, Meg. that get that, which I think is why you were in just the perfect role for you. And it's been so invigorating for me. I think, yeah, that's the word I want to use, to watch your career as you've grown and evolved with your family and the move. It's so exciting. So how, Ms. Elkins, how are you staying grounded, right? Especially during this time with existential crises of the week and the family. And I know now, being at a systems level, change can feel slow or complex or it's never going to happen. So, how do you just hold on and keep going?
Yeah. 2 things. I am leaning so hard into self-care. I don't skip my runs. I started Headspace for meditations.
Love that for you.
I go to bed on time at the right time every night. I don't watch television news. And then the
No,
second yeah.
you don't do that.
Yeah. And then the second thing is that, and this is the first job I can say this authentically, it's not a race to the end. I stopped racing to the next thing. I stopped thinking about, how is this going to help me build to the next thing that I want to do? How am I going to leverage this and go get some other title? When you can find that point where the person you are in your heart is the person you are professionally, that alignment creates this space where you can breathe and you can ride the waves because you know you are doing exactly what you need to be doing. You're in the right place with the right people, and you can have that well of optimism that really is limitless.
I feel like I should just turn off my mic right now because that was perfect. And I don't know that I've ever heard anybody quite state it so perfectly before, because and I know that we've been like, what's next in the career? Where's the title? We got to support our family. We're going to need more money. We're going to make a bigger impact.
Yes.
This isn't good enough. It's not big enough. It's not strong enough. And just when you find where you're supposed to be, it is peace.
Mhm,
And then you're growing exponentially and you can see what your intentions are reflected in the world back to you.
mhm.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's in a good job, but they're telling themselves, like, this is horrible. I hate this, but this is a good job. I'm supposed to be happy. What advice would you give them when they know that they're meant for something more that's aligned with their purpose?
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad always told me the best time to look for a job is when you already have one. And I think the best thing I ever did was get a coach, because that person sat with me and helped me identify, these are the things that I love. These are the things that I'm good at. And then they helped me identify what other job titles are out there. You don't know how those skill sets could be represented in somebody's generic job description. Once you find what you think you want to move into, go and have an informational interview. When I talked to people who worked in the field that I wanted to get into, not only did it help validate, yes, this is what I want to go do, but it also supremely prepared me for the interview, because I was able to take their hindsight and think, if I would have gone back, I would have done this and this and this, or I wish I would have known da 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 da. Right? That is really going to help you when you're going into the interview moment. But I would say, you can pay the bills every day, every week for the next 10 years and still be physically ill and not spending time with your kids and not your authentic self. It's so important to go and figure out what it is that you want out of life first. Then, how can you find that in a career? And I guarantee you that the money will be enough.
Well, thank you again, Meg, for joining me. And thank you to everyone listening for showing up, reflecting, and for unmuting yourself in your own way. If today's conversation inspired you, please share this episode, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories of leaders creating work that truly fits and matters. Until next time, unmute yourself and step into the story only you can tell.